With all the rising lawsuits about defamation and talk about freedom of speech, I think we should go back to the basic of understanding what does freedom of speech actually mean. I'll simplify that in this video. Hi there, my name is Catherine. I'm a lawyer and I also think differently. Here in the United States, our right to freedom of speech comes from the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. This is the full text of the First Amendment. I will only talk about the part about the freedom of speech because that's what we're talking about here. The First Amendment says that Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. The word abridging means reducing or limiting. In simple terms, the First Amendment says that Congress cannot make any laws that limit someone's freedom of speech. Who is the First Amendment specifically talking to? It's Congress, not individuals. The First Amendment was written for Congress to know that it cannot limit an individual's freedom of speech. Here in the U.S., Congress is a branch of the government. That's why the First Amendment was specifically directed to the government and not us individuals, because the First Amendment is trying to limit the government from censoring our freedom of speech. The First Amendment does not say that a person can limit another person's freedom of speech, because it has to be the government that limits another person's freedom of speech that is protected by the First Amendment. Here's an example that my constitutional law professor told us in class. He said, when your parents tell you that you can't say something, you can't go back and say, Mom, Dad, you're infringing on my freedom of speech by the First Amendment, because that is wrong. Your parents' response should be, I'm not the government. What constitutes as the government? As the law evolved, the term government has evolved too and expanded. It now includes the federal government, the state government, the local governments, elected officials, lawmakers, public schools, universities, courts, and law enforcement. What is the First Amendment trying to protect against? It's trying to protect against laws. What type of laws? Laws that limit freedom of speech. Now, what type of speeches? Speech could be something that you say, something that you write. It can even be something that is considered an expression of an idea, such as something that you wear, something that you draw, anything that could be considered as symbolic speech. What is the purpose of the freedom of speech? It's very important to remember this when we're discussing freedom of speech, because what is considered a protected speech and a not protected speech generally will be based on the reasoning and the purpose behind the idea of freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is based on the belief that allowing different ideas, especially competing ideas, can improve our democracy. It's based on the belief that we as citizens become better informed if we are exposed to competing ideas and can talk about them freely without being afraid of being censored by the government. What type of speeches does the First Amendment protect? It protects speeches that are a matter of public concern, such as public issues involving elected officials or the government or public schools, public health. Those are just some of the examples. It also protects truthful speeches. Of course, what is truthful can sometimes be hard to determine. That's why it becomes a case-by-case basis, or what we call fact-specific. It really depends on the facts of the case and the situation. The First Amendment even protects unpopular, disagreeable, and even offensive speeches. For example, the U.S. Supreme Court has held that the First Amendment protects the symbolic speech of burning the American flag in public in front of the convention center as a show of protest of a president's policy. Are all types of speeches protected? Nope, not all speeches are protected by the First Amendment. The U.S. Supreme Court has identified 9 types of speeches that are not protected speech, and they are creatively called unprotected speeches. Here are the list of the 9 unprotected speeches. They are obscenity, fighting words, child pornography, fraud and perjury, blackmail, incitement to imminent lawless action, true threats, solicitation to commit a crime, and defamation. Since these 9 speeches are not protected by the First Amendment, that means the government can create laws that limit, restricts, and even abolish these types of speeches. That's why laws written against these 9 unprotected speeches are deemed constitutional and do not violate the First Amendment. As you saw, one of the 9 unprotected speeches include defamation. With the rising trials involving defamation, such as the Johnny Depp trial, the Alex Jones trials, and other high-profile trials coming up in the country, I think it's very important for us to talk about defamation next and how the First Amendment affects that. So tune in next time when we simplify defamation. Don't forget to subscribe if you learned something new. Remember, verbal and drawings and written speeches are protected by the First Amendment too, as long as they're not one of the 9 unprotected speeches.